Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here for another edition of All on allpointtv.com and also WFOV 92.1. And we are very glad to have you with us again this afternoon. And we'll be here for the next hour broadcasting on some topics I think you'll be interested in. I was listening to the news this morning, and I was listening to one of our representatives, Dan Kildee, was talking about whether or not they should go forward with the impeachment on this president based on the evidence they have right now, claiming there was collusion in the election of 2016. They haven't proved anything about collusion. They've been investigating this now for 2 years. I thought his comments, though, were reasonable, and he was saying that we need to be working on other matters and let the evidence come out, and it's too early to make a determination about whether or not we have impeachable offenses against this president. And I would agree with that. And of course, what Kildee was saying was very reasonable. We'll, of course, knowing that he's a politician just like the rest of them. Whenever a politician is talking, you have to take everything they say with a grain of salt. And I'll just be watching to see how he, in fact, votes once the issue comes up before the House, because I think that they have to go forward with the impeachment because they've got to, in fact, please their base, because that's what they ran on. They didn't run on any policies. They ran on the fact that Trump has got to go. And so that's where they're coming from. That we elected the wrong person. We didn't give it to crooked Hillary. And so Donald Trump won, and so there's got to be some reason for it. It can't be the fact that the voters woke up and found out that we cannot support a criminal, a known criminal, and make that person president. So there must have been some outside interference, and that outside interference, it could not have come from China, could not have come from Israel, could not have come from anybody. It had to come from the failed state, the empire that was defeated by Ronald Reagan. And so if there was anybody that was interfering in the election, and in fact there was any collusion, it had to be the Trump administration, at that point the Trump campaign, colluding with Russia, and Russia, of course, caused the outcome to be what it was. We didn't go to the polls now and decide ourselves that we're not going to vote for crooked Hillary. That had been a determination made by the Russians, who in fact guided us to the polls, and was interfering with all these precincts we have around the country, and they determined the outcome of the election. It wasn't the 63 million voters that went to the poll and voted for Donald Trump.
Another thing is too, though. I mean, what I would like to see is what I like to see though is like I would like to know this. They're the same party. The Democrats are the party always. Oh, every time technology comes down the road, we got to embrace it. Okay. Well, we go to electronic voting, which is very easy to manipulate. It's online.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, oh, look what happened. They're the ones that advocated for this. Most likely they are. They're the
Yeah.
side that does that. So I mean, I think that we should go back to printed ballots. Yeah, another thing is, I think we should have. I think they should be. I mean, and they should take more time to count them. We could wait a couple of days if that's an issue. I mean, notice it wasn't an issue until Al Gore and Bush. It was never an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that the election of the '60s was gone to Kennedy because it was illegal means, but now it's fine. But now it's like this is a big issue. Voting, we can't count. We simply can't count votes now. It's just weird.
Yeah, John, what was the interference on the part of the Russians in Georgia and in Florida, Arizona, and other states where the votes were counted weeks after the election was over? They still counted the votes. Was that Russia also? We have some problems that are internal, but this idea that we have outsiders that actually influence the election outcomes in this country, that's a little bit much from what the evidence points to. We do have election problems in this country, but those problems are caused by the internal disorder that we have in our politics. And this idea, it only happens in third world countries. And I hear that all the time, that this is what happens in third world countries. Well, hello, somebody. It's happening here, too. And if you're going to make the case it only happens in third world countries, then this country must be a third world country then, because it's happening in the United States. But we went to the polls. I know I went to the poll. I think my vote was counted. and I voted for Donald Trump. I don't think anybody was pushing me, my guiding my hand to indicate my choice was other than what it was. I voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and I'm glad that I did. I mean, I was not going to vote for Hillary Clinton, who's been in Washington now and been involved in the political landscape for 30 years. And looking at her track record, I think this country. I mean, I voted against it. I think this country boarded a bullet in 2016, and we ought to be very glad that an outsider, and that outsider is Donald Trump, that Donald Trump is president of the United States, and we should be very glad about that because we avoided an outcome that if it had not been Donald Trump and it had been Hillary Clinton, this would have been a disaster. And at least we have some respite from the business as usual that's killing this country, and we have now a chance to turn some corners that we need to turn in order to get this country under control because the political landscape in Washington is out of control. Last week, I was listening to some more of the noise that's being made about Donald Trump. Everything he does, of course, is wrong. And anything that he does before it gets into the political landscape, they're going to say that there's something wrong with it because they're going to criticize this president no matter what he does. They just are not going to accept that the American people went to the polls and they, of their own volition, determined the outcome of that election, and 63 million voters decided that Donald Trump should be the 45th president of the United States. So they got to make some reason why that determination was wrong. And of course, what they're doing is saying that everything that he's doing has a downside to it. And I was listening last week to them talking about how the president did not take part in the Apostles' Creed. Now, all the other persons on that front row, the former presidents and their wives, they were in fact reading from the script, but not Donald Trump and not Melania, the First Lady. They weren't reading from the script. So let me read the script to you about the Apostles' Creed in case you may not have gotten this in your Sunday school class. The Apostles' Creed. This is the one that Donald Trump did not take part in as President of the United States, and Melania Trump did not take part in as the First Lady. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Ghost, born of Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. He descended into hell. The third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven and sits at the right hand of God the Almighty, God the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the quick and the dead. I believe in the Holy Ghost. I believe in the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints. I don't know if they had that part in there or not about the Catholic Church. The forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. Now, the president did not take part in that ceremony, that part of the ceremony. And the press the next day made a big deal out of how everyone else was in fact involved in reading the Apostles' Creed, but not the president, because he was in fact claiming to be an evangelical, and look at how he was standing up there and he was not reciting the Apostles' Creed. What's wrong with this man, right? I mean, this cannot go on. Well, you know, you talk about how the president is anti-Islam. He's he's Islamic phobic. He is anti-Semitic, so he doesn't like the Jews, although his son-in-law is Jewish. And what would it look like for the president to be taking the Apostles' Creed and reciting those lines I just read, and you have Jews in the country, you have Muslims in the country, you have atheists in the country, and here's the President of the United States who is supposed to be upholding the separation of church and state. All of you persons out there that believe that the Constitution requires an article, well, I should say article amendment, the First Amendment, that requires a separation between the church and the state. Of course, you can't find that in the First Amendment. It was imported in 1962 in the Ingham versus Vitale case. And before that, you had, in 1948, you had a movement toward in that direction, 1948, in the, let's see, what was that case? Everett versus Board of Education. And so that was the first time when they had a crack in this idea, the crack in the wall, so to speak, that there was something in the Constitution that requires a separation of the church and the state, and that's found in the First Amendment in terms of the freedom of religion. Now, if you can find there is a separation required between the church and state in the First Amendment, please read it to me or send me a telegram, or maybe we're not doing about telegram anymore. You can send me the send like that one song says, send me a message in a bottle. Send a message in a bottle, baby, and just send it to me, and let me know where that's found. It's made up, and it's part of the ways we doing business today, where we in fact dismiss the Constitution, and if it doesn't require what we say it requires, we simply just make it up and keep on moving. I mean, but the president did not do the Apostles' Creed because of this idea of the separation of church and state. And why would the president participate in that? Even if he believes in it, you wouldn't partake of it, because it would in fact show a certain amount of dismissal of all the ones who do not believe in that. Not only the Muslims, not only the Jewish community, but those who don't have any religious beliefs. And so the president, who's the president of all the people, correctly stood away from reading the creed. But then the ones that read it, they're not the president anymore. And if they had been president, they should not have participated in it, for the same reason that we claim that there's a separation of church and state. In other words, you can't have it where the claim is made that the Constitution requires a separation, at the same time demand the president participate as if you're not demanding separation. It's consistent with the idea that we bought into, that there is a requirement of a separation between the church and the state, and the president represents the state, the highest executive office holder of the state. So his position was correct. But if you go back and read about how this was so terrible, can't believe the president would not partake, and he claims to be evangelical, but look at what he did, and so on and so forth. And you can see here the president, again, he can't do anything right. I was I was in my study last night preparing for this program, and I was laughing out loud in the study. And my wife came in. She wanted to know what was I laughing at. I couldn't stop laughing from what I was reading. And my wife came in there and she said, "What are you laughing at?" And I told her what I was laughing at was I was reading these reports on the climate. Where the scientists, so-called scientists, are in agreement about climate change being man-made. In other words, we by breathing, we breathe out carbon dioxide. So we, by breathing, for example, are part of the problem, because carbon dioxide is causing global warming. And the consensus of what we're being told is clear about that the climate is being changed toward global warming because carbon dioxide is being emitted into the atmosphere, and that's causing the globe to warm. So we are a problem. We are, by being here, we are the problem. And science is pretty much has a consensus on that phenomenon. So I'm reading the reports, right, in my study last night, and I couldn't help myself. I didn't know I was laughing so loud, but I was reading the science, the so-called science on this. So I thought I would bring that to the studio and I would read some of what they're saying. to you. So you can see how maybe you won't find it as funny as I did, but I still find it to be hilarious of what these people want us to believe. You know, the sun is there's a sun out there. It's been there forever. There's nobody that is living right now that lived at a time where there was not a sun. But that's not causing global warming. What's causing global warming is carbon dioxide. And so the scientists have consensus on that. Carbon dioxide is causing global warming. Now, first of all, let's see how we got here to the global warming as the problem that we have right now. We had, before that, up until 1979, we had global cooling. And then when it was clear that over the last 10 years, the globe has in fact cooled by, before 79, it was clear that the globe had in fact cooled by 1 degree. They had to then get away from that because that was obviously not true over the last 10 years. So then they said that there is global warming. And when that was not panning out, because over the last 130 years, we've had the globe only warming by a little bit more than 1 degree over a 130-year period of time, they had to get away from global warming also, and so they went to climate change. The climate is changing. And when I was on a program a couple of weeks ago and I was talking about this bogus science, that if the globe is if you have climate change, I think you would agree with me, it can only change in one of two directions. It either is changing toward warming or it's changing toward cooling. And they dismiss both of those as what's going on. And they went to climate change, but climate I'm reading these reports last night. It can only change in two directions. They dismiss global cooling. That was dismissed. Then they dismiss global warming. Then they dismiss that and went to climate change. So I'm in my office last night laughing. My wife wanted to know what was I laughing about. Here's what I was laughing about. Let me read some of their conclusions. Now there were 10. They had an article I was reading last evening. I was reading quite a few articles, but the one that really caught my tickle spot was the one called "The Reality of Climate Change." 10 myths busted. So they're gonna bust these myths, and they're gonna give us the science that show that the myths that we have come to, because we don't know anything out here, and so the myths the scientists are going to bust are 10 in number. I just picked out 2 of them. Here's myth number 4. That the myth is the planet can't be warming when my front yard is covered in several feet of snow. So, people would say, how is the globe warming when we out here in the wintertime shoveling all this snow? Now, you may not be aware of that in California, for example, but over here in Michigan, we're very much aware of that. We'd be shoveling snow again in the middle of the winter this year like we did last year. In fact, I was trying not to get a snow blower, and for 20 years, I kept saying, I'm not going to buy a snow blower. But after I found that every year I'm dealing with 2 and 3 feet of snow, I finally broke down and went and bought a snowblower. So I'm ready for the winter this year, and I was ready for it last year. I finally went and bought one because I saw global cooling, and the snow was not making me feel any better about global warming. So anyway, here's the myth, number 4. The planet can't be warming when my front yard is covered in several feet of snow. How can that happen? The globe is warming, but we have all the snow during wintertime. This winter has been one. This is talking about the winters that we've had more recently. This winter has been one of the chilliest. How is that possible in a warming world? Well, what you know what? The scientists have the answer. We don't know anything out here, so the scientists have told us this. Local temperatures taken as individual data points have nothing to do with the long-term trend of global warming. Let me explain that. I couldn't stop laughing last night. In other words, what they're saying here is if you have local temperatures and you see cooling in those temperatures, that doesn't explain anything because local temperatures taken as individual data points, that's Flint, for example, or Detroit, or maybe you live let's say you live in Portland, or you live in Florida, wherever you live. Those are just local data points that don't amount to anything. These local ups and downs in weather and temperature can hide a slower moving uptick in long-term climate. Let's say, for example, they predicted by the end of this century, we're now 81 years away from that. 80, well, it'll be 81 years next year, but 82 years, okay, therefore, from that next year. So they're predicting by the end of the 21st century, we will have global warming, unless we change our course, global warming to the extent that by the 21st century, the end of this century, we will have temperatures that nobody can stand. Now, I won't give you my age, but I won't be here. I don't know many persons out there will be here by the 21st century to witness this global warming. If we don't get off this track, by the end of the century, 82 years from now, 81 next year, years from now, we're going to have the globe so warm that nobody's going to be able to come outside. You have to have air conditioning on your front porch. That's how hot it's going to be. And it's a long-term trend that when we get there, you'll find that it will be very hot during that time. Now, it doesn't matter about the local temperatures right now because that does not mean that the uptick will not occur over time. We don't, of course, everybody's in a local area, right? So then whatever the local temperature is where you are, that would be part of the trend, wouldn't it? Wherever you are, there's a local trend in that area. The trend here in Flint is that we have, in the wintertime, we have cold weather. We have a lot of snow. And if you are in a place where that's not the case, I would imagine that you're either in places like Florida and California. But where there's been snow in the past, during the wintertime, you have snow during this time as well. But they're telling us, these are the scientists now telling us, local temperatures taken as individual data points, individual now, every city has its own individual data point, have nothing to do with the long-term trend of global warming. Why? Because it's just that year, and the long-range trend will be different, as if that won't be the beginning of a trend. I mean, 2018 is the beginning of a trend, isn't it? And so over the next so many years, the trend will be what's happening here now and will be happening over the next 81, 82 years. That will be the trend. But right now, we got cold weather in the wintertime. Doesn't matter because that's just the individual data in the places where you are. We all in individual places, right? And so the data collected in individual places will show us what the trends are there, here, and everywhere else. But that's to be dismissed by the scientists. So I'm looking at that and that's hilarious.
Well, you know what? I'm going to interject here. I'm going to interject here. I know that years ago, Sting, the singer for the group called Police, said he was made aware of the climate change because he was visiting some tribe in South or Central America. They took him to a mountain. They said, we used to have snow on there, now it's diminishing. So that's a local spot.
Yeah.
He was like so aware
Right.
of that, but now nobody else's observations are just as valid.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, John, everybody is living in a local area. but the local data doesn't matter because you see, it's the whole landscape, the whole Earth that we have to consider whether or not there's warming based upon what's happening around the globe. But everyone is in a local area of the globe. So what's the temperature in those local areas, and how does that fit into the larger landscape? And so they want to act like the local has nothing to do with the global, but the local is the global. But it's a local in every one of the areas where people are on that mountain you're talking about, and elsewhere. So that was, so I'm there laughing right last night. Okay, here's the other myth. Some other myths. This is
We're coming up on 26 minutes right now. So.
okay, and we're going to take a break at this point, and we'll come back. Hopefully, you'll come back on WFOV after your 4 minute hiatus is over, and we will see you on the other side of the break. Okay, continuing what we're doing here at allpointstv.com. Let me read you another myth that I thought was just out. I mean, if you want comedy, here's another example of it. This is myth number, I think, number 6. There are 10 myths altogether that they are going to correct our thinking. You know, we are out here with these myths, and the scientists are going are going to straighten us out. So here's another myth. Global warming has stopped and the earth has begun to cool. So we don't understand what's going on. So here's a scientist making us, that is helping us to overcome our ignorance. The last decade, 2000, this is a little bit dated now, but the last decade, 2000 to 2009, was the hottest on record according to skeptical science. Big blizzards and abnormally chilly weather often raised the question, how can global warming be occurring when it's snowing outside? Global warming is compatible, listen to this now, global warming is compatible with chill weather. Now, I'll come back there in just a minute. Global warming is compatible with chill weather. In other words, you heard him say this some time ago, that global cooling is caused by global warming. Have you heard that one, John? Global cooling is caused by global warming.
Yeah, I heard that later on. Yeah.
So here's one. The scientists are correcting us now because we don't know anything out here. Global warming is compatible with chill weather. Quote, for climate change, it is the long-term trends that are important. See, these long-term trends now, don't ever get confused by the short term. The short term have nothing to do with the long term. For climate change, it is the long-term trends that are important. The trends that you won't be alive 81 years from now to see. But don't worry, it's going to be bad by the end of the century. Now, you won't be here, but take their word for it because the short range don't matter. For climate change, it is the long-term trends that are important, measured over decades or more, and those long-term trends show that the globe is still, unfortunately, warming, according to skeptical science. Now, you shouldn't be skeptical yourself, but the skeptical science that we're skeptical about it, but the data shows that they're right, and so therefore, these long-range trends, they have nothing to do with what's happening right now, but the trend will start so that by the end of the century, it will complete itself, and we will be able to tell you in 2100 AD that the trends that didn't start now, but it's long range, in 81, 82 years from now, we'll know that the trends are that we have, the globe is in fact heating up. But it doesn't start now, it starts in the future, and it'll get there in 81, 82 years. Not starting now, though.
Well, coming back from break. Yeah.
If that makes any sense to you, or what the scientists are saying, then here's some more of it that will make even more sense to you if that made any sense. Want to welcome WFOV back from their break, and we're still here ranting and laughing at what's passing for science because they don't think that that you can think, and they are just and so they're putting these statements out here because they don't think you can decipher what these experts are saying. Here's from another study, equally hilarious, by the way. The 97% consensus on global warming. I was arguing with a person on a radio program about a month ago. I can't believe how gullible some people are. And I hope that person listening to this program uh, telling me about there's a 97% consensus by the scientists that global warming is a fact, and 97% of the climate scientists agree that that is true. Now I brought the chart here, and I'm going to share that chart with you in just a minute of how they arrived at 97%. And by the way, this is what Obama said at Georgetown University. I think it was in 2013 when he made this statement. I think that's what she was quoting from Obama. I don't know where Obama got his climate degree from, but he was mouthing the nonsense of those who say there's a 97% consensus of the science. The climate scientists agreed, 97% agree that there is global warming taking place. I'm gonna give you some information about that chart that they claim that shows that, because I have the chart and I want to share the chart with you and let you see how again another example of liars. Liars can figures, but figures don't lie. And here's another example of it. But let me just read this part before we get to the chart. This is a 97% consensus on global warming. And here's what it says here. Here's what it says in this conclusion. What the scientists say that humans are causing global warming is the position of the academies of science from 80 countries plus many scientific organizations that study climate science say the same thing. More specifically, around 95% of active researchers there's that word again, actively publishing climate papers endorse the consensus position. And the consensus position is that climate change, global warming in this case, is caused by humans are the ones pushing the envelope in this case here. And 97% of the scientists agree that this global warming that we're seeing is man-made. We are, through our carbon emission, causing the globe to warm. Not the sun, human beings. And they're causing it, since carbon dioxide is our breathing, is also carbon emissions from our energy source. The globe is warming because of that. So therefore, we got to go back to the Stone Age, right? We can't be burning these fossil fuels. We got to put solar and wind together to bring about a decrease in the temperature, because there's just too much progress going on. And the government doesn't have any role in it if we're going to continue to do this. So we can't allow that to go on. So we got to invite government in to solve this problem, because look at how we are in fact treating the earth, and we are causing the globe to warm by our external behavior, not the sun. It's people breathing and people emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So here's the consensus that they're talking about. Authors of 7 climate consensus studies including Naomi Oreskes, Peter Doran, William Anderegg, Bart. They make these names hard to pronounce, so that's the indication there of their expertise. Why would they put these hard names in there if you if that you can't pronounce the names if these persons are not authentic scientists? So it sounds like we're talking about people around the globe. So they put in there Verhagen, Bart Verhagen, Ed Malbech, uh, Stuart Carlton, John, and then John Cook, one of the major presenters. So it's like a global group co-authored a paper, and that should, according to this report, that should settle the expert climate consensus once and for all. The question, once and for all. The two conclusions from the paper are: one, depending on, now listen to this part very carefully, depending on exactly how you measure, depending on exactly how you measure the expert consensus, it's somewhere between 90% and 100% that agree humans are responsible for climate change, with most of our studies finding 97% consensus among publishing climate scientists. Number two, listen to this part here now. The greater the climate expertise among those surveyed, the higher the consensus on human-caused global warming. In other words, the greater your expertise in the scientific community, the more they are in line with the 97% consensus that we are driving global warming around the world. Now, notice this other part I referred to earlier. Yes, I always pay attention to these adjectives, these modifiers. That humans are causing global warming is the position of the academies of science from 80 countries plus many scientific organizations that study climate science. More specifically, listen to this part here now, more specifically, around 95% of active climate researchers actively publishing climate papers endorse the consensus position that 97% of them agree that climate change is man-made. Okay. Before I get to the chart, I want that they're quoting. Let me read one other document here, but I want to get to the chart because they said something here very important in terms of it all depends on how you're reading the data, depending on exactly how you measure the expert consensus is somewhere between 90% and 100%. But it all depends on how you read the data. I'm going to show you how to read the data in this chart. But let me read, before I get to the chart, I want to read one other of the experts now. We don't know anything out here. The experts are telling us about this global warming. And they're going to inform us of how far base we are of those of us who are climate change deniers. I'm one of them, by the way. I'm a climate science denier because I have looked at their data and I have determined, looking at their own chart, that they are in fact lying, and I'm going to prove that through the chart they have, through the chart that they use. But before I get to the chart, I want to read this to you. Scientific consensus on human-caused global warming as compared to the expertise of the surveyed sample. There's a strong correlation, they say, between consensus and climate science expertise. Okay, so those of you who disagree, I want you to know this is what they're saying here. They want you to know that you are being confronted by those who have a greater amount of expertise, and they contravene your view because you don't have the expertise that they have, and they are the experts, and the higher your expertise, the more they are in line with the consensus report, which is that 97% of them are saying that climate change is man-made. Forget the sun. Forget the rotation of the Earth on its axis as it's going around on its axis, turning the Earth toward the sun. Forget that. Forget that we have the four seasons. If you don't know the four seasons by knowing we have winter, summer, spring, and autumn. If you don't know that, then just listen to the group that's called the Four Seasons. There's a group called the Four Seasons. You can learn through that. Just understand when they're singing, that's the four seasons that they're referring to. So you can get it through the song, through the song group, the singing group, or you can get it through knowing that there are four seasons we go through. That's climate change, but don't forget that that's caused by the Earth rotating on its axis. Forget that. It's caused by man and the carbon dioxide being emitted. So 97% agree, and the more expertise you have about the climate change, the more expertise the scientists have, the more they agreed upon the consensus. Those who do not agree, well, they don't have the expertise. That's the problem they have. That's why, according to the report, that's why those who oppose taking action to curb climate change have engaged in a misinformation campaign to deny the existence of the expert consensus. We out here, we just are so anti-scientific. We deny what the consensus is, but those who have the greatest amount of expertise say that it's real. So we who deny that, we don't have the expertise. That's why we are wrong. They've been largely successful, those of us, as a public to badly underestimate the expert consensus and what we call the consensus gap. Only 16% of Americans realize that the consensus is about 90%. So we are misinformed out here. Only 16% of us understand that the consensus by those who are the experts are in agreement that 97% of those persons that have the expertise that we don't have agree that the climate is being changed by man. And so here's a chart that they're using. I have their chart. And this is why I was laughing. So all of you non-experts out there that don't know anything, let me show you how they arrived at 97.1% of the scientists agree upon global change being caused by man-made. Forget the four seasons, forget the sun, you're causing it, and 97% of the people agree upon that. So let's see how they arrived at that number. First of all, see, they don't think you can read the charts. I have the charts. I can read the charts. I read it very well. I read it better than they do. Because, first of all, of the number of persons in this report, about 18,000 scientists, 66.4% of them have no AGW position on it. So 7,930 of these scientists are taken out of the poll because they don't have any position. So they just simply put them on the sideline. Of the remaining ones, which is 3,896, And of that number, 32.6%, therefore, of the total sample, of that 32% that's left, because the others took no position on it, 7,930 took no positions on the global warming position. Why? Because they didn't have enough data. So they are then put on the sideline of the report, have no position. So what's left then is 3,896 persons that took a position on it. And of the 3,896 persons took a position, 97% of them say that global warming is man-made. Now forget about the fact that 7,930 took no position on it. 66.4% took no position on it. Forget that. Let's go with the 3,896% that took a position. Of that percentage that took a position, one third of the whole, 97% of them agreed that global warming is man-made. The 66% that did not take a position, they're just excluded from the poll altogether. And the point I'm trying to make here is they did not do the total sampling of those that did not take a position along with those who did take a position. They only took the ones that took a position, and of that percentage, of those that did, 32.6% or 97% of the ones who took a position agreed that there is global warming that's man-made. They took out the ones that took no position, which means that liars can figure, but figures don't lie. So they didn't include the ones that took no position in the whole sampling. If you include them in the sampling, then it means that only one third of the scientists took a position that is man-made. But they did not include the total scientific community. They only took the ones that wrote a report based upon the incomplete data. The rest of them are saying we need more information to make that determination. And so they're telling us that 97% of the scientists are in agreement that global warming is man-made, but that's not what their own data shows. And I have the chart right here in front of me that shows that they are misappropriating the information that shows that's not what the scientific community is saying. Because the globe has been warming ever since we had a sun out there. And it'll be out there at least for another, according to, I think another billion years, because the reason why we have the sun emitting heat at a temperature, by the way, of 27 million degrees at its core. The sun is at its core 27 million degrees Fahrenheit, or about 15 million degrees Celsius. And the reason why this is going on is because of the helium and other gas that have been captured, and the friction inside of the sun of those gases pretty much fighting each other, if you want to call it that, and those gases cannot escape in total. By being captured inside the sun, is causing a radioactive response, and that's giving off heat that we're feeling 93 million miles away. With the rays of the sun shining at a rate taking 5 minutes to get to the Earth. You learned this in science class, that the sun rays travel at 186,000 miles per second. So about 5 minutes from there to here, and the global warming that we are getting comes from the sun. We're out there looking at the sun, and they're saying man is causing it through carbon dioxide. And they definitely can push this lie that's being placed at the feet of these bogus scientists, and that's that these paid political hacks in the scientific community. They can push that when you see the chimneys putting out this. I saw a smokestack the other day, and it was putting out this white, looks like It looks like some kind of pollution. Now they don't tell people that's water, the condensation of water, and they tell them that this is pollution coming out of those pipes, when that is water, the condensing of water, because you can't see carbon dioxide. Just blow. Take your hand and blow into it as you are exhaling, and just blow into your hand and see if you see anything there. I'll wait for you to do that. Did you see any? Did you see when you took a breath and blew out the carbon dioxide? Did you see anything in your hand? The only time you'll see it is when you go outside where there is a condensation of carbon dioxide through a cold temperature, and then you can see the condensation of the carbon dioxide. But it is not a pollutant. That's why it. What is carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's a plant food. And when you emit carbon dioxide, you're adding to the vegetation of the earth. And that's why they talk about greenhouse effect. That's why in greenhouses, you can go down some of these streets and see some of these companies that grow their food in these greenhouses. In order to have the plants grow in those greenhouses, they have to have carbon dioxide. You see these little tubes they put in there that emits carbon dioxide inside of these containers that are growing plants. They put carbon dioxide in there because without carbon dioxide, the plants won't grow. And go into those places sometime and look and see inside those greenhouses when they're talking about the greenhouse effect. Well, the greenhouse effect takes place because of carbon dioxide. You can't grow anything without carbon dioxide. And that's what they have in all those greenhouses where they are doing plants around the year. What are they doing? They're putting carbon dioxide in those enclosed environments, because when you close off from the outside air, carbon dioxide can get to the plants because it's enclosed. So they import the carbon dioxide. What is that telling us there? It's telling us that carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's a good thing. It's not a pollutant. It's a necessary gas in order to have plant life do its job. If without carbon dioxide, it can't do its job. And yet they made that a pollutant. That's why I was laughing last night. I had to tell my wife I'm laughing because I'm reading what they claim is the science, and it's laughable what they're saying about why we are, in fact, in trouble. We're not in trouble because of carbon dioxide. We are the beneficiaries of carbon dioxide, and all the scientists that are not willing to go along with this scam, and that's what it is. It's a scam. They took no position on it because they could not draw the conclusion that 33% of them drew that is man-made global warming. 33% of 100% of the scientists took a position, and 97% of that 33% said it's man-made. But it's not 97% of all the scientists. It's 97% of the 33%. And they want to act like the total representation of all the scientists that took a position one way or the other. Some took no position. They're not counted in the pool. The 97% of the 33% said, yes, that's true, but there were 66% that were not in the poll at all, and they were excluded from the 97% that were in fact counted. So it's dishonest for them to say that there is a consensus of the scientific community, because the scientific community does not go along with that. The ones who are more careful in it, in their conclusion, have said that it's too early for us to draw the conclusions. We need more data. And they're telling us that the data does not have to be complete at this point. We already know what's going to happen if we don't get off this course. You know, you see some examples of the way it's playing out. Look in Paris right now. Why are those persons out there in the street burning? I mean, Paris was once one of our great cities around the world. Why is Paris on fire right now? Because Macron, unlike our president, Macron is over there talking about global warming is a crisis, and they're paying about half the gasoline tax over in France. Half of it is the government taxation policy. Now, wouldn't the government, if it's going to benefit from global warming, the scam, as I call it, wouldn't the government want to have global warming caused by man so they can begin to tax carbon? Because that puts money in the treasury of the government coffers. Wouldn't they want to have that as the scientific conclusion? Yeah, they benefit from that. So they're over there raising ruckus in France because they are suffering the consequences of this bogus claim, the taxation policies and so on, so which is really is what this is about. I'm saying here, based upon reading their own reports, that climate change is another fraud being perpetrated by these politicians, and there is no man-made global warming of any significance. This is a natural phenomenon that's taking place. It always has occurred, and we've got to watch again what we're being told by these quote-unquote experts. The experts, again, are off kilter. Okay, you can take it or go and read it yourself. Go read the reports, and you'll see that I'm right again, and they're wrong, and I'm big and they're small, and they need to go somewhere and shut up. That's the bottom line. Okay, we got to get out of here. Until next time, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.